I guess since it's a little after 7 and we were supposed to start at 7, we can get started. We don't really have to call it to order because it's not really a meeting, it's just an informational forum. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I know it's probably fun to drive here. I just walked, but it's probably an interesting drive. To start off with, I just want to remind everybody of the purpose of this meeting. This is an information meeting to try and inform public on a vote that will happen March 7th on whether or not we should consolidate pursuant to Act 46. It's not a meeting to debate the merits of Act 46 or consolidation, nor can we really discuss any language changes in our articles, as they are what they are, and they've been approved by the Agency of Education. So, those would just be way off topic. If you could hold your questions until the end, the presentation is probably 10 or 15 minutes, and then we've left the rest of the entire meeting for questions. If there's something we don't have an answer for, which, is possible, even with this panel, we will get it to you. We have flyers over by the door that have ways to contact committee members, our blog spot, WCSU, there's an email on there that you can email. We will get answers to you on questions if they have answers. I mean, I suppose there are situations you could come up with that just wouldn't have an answer. So before I actually start the presentation, I just want to introduce the members of the committee that are actually here. I'm Joe Winrick. I'm a Townshend resident. I am actually chair of the Leland and Gray board, but I'm serving on this as just a citizen of Townshend and a school board member. Brett?
I'm Brett Sanderson, Townshend resident and also on the school board of Townshend.
Ken McFadden. I'm a Newfane resident and also on the Newfane board.
Heidi, you're the last one.
Heidi Russ, I'm a Townshend resident. I'm sure many of you know me because I work here in the school.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so first of all, a little background for you about the process. The WCSU started talking about Act 46 right after it was sort of announced in 2015. And you're probably fairly familiar with our structure. We have, Brookline, Dover, Jamaica, Marlborough, Newbrook, Stratton, Townsend, Wardsboro, and Wyndham. In that, we have some K-6, a K-8, a union high school with 5 sending towns, and a non-operating district. We pretty much have just about every system you can have in this state, all contained in one supervisory union. We also have some geographic challenges with, even though Marlborough, Dover, and Wardsboro are contiguous towns, you can't get from one to the other on a paved road. So we have some difficulties. There's weather, there's winter, but we've been working together with WCSU for quite some time and fairly successfully. I mean, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on in our supervisory union. And so when Act 46 came out, the entire supervisory union boards sat down and started talking about what we might be able to do. And after a fair amount of discussion, we decided that there would be, you can go to the next slide, Heidi. The sort of the right choice for our supervisory union was to do 2 separate proposals. This is the West River Education District, which is made up of the 5 Leland and Gray towns. And then there's a separate other side of this consolidation, which is Marlborough, Wardsboro, and Dover. And they're going to be known as the River Valleys Unified School District, should they form. If it all is voted on positively on March 7th, then there would be one board that ran those schools and a second board that ran the West River Education District, and then still a supervisory union board over that. But it would consolidate the governance structure there, and so you would have, one board responsible for the 5 and one board responsible for 3. We would need approval. If all 5 of the Leland and Gray towns actually approve the merger, then it will be a unified union district. If 4 districts approve it, then we'll end up with a modified union school district. In this consolidation vote, Newfane and Brookline, since they're already a joint contract board, are deemed necessary towns, so they must vote for this, they must approve this consolidation for it to go forward. All the other 3 towns in the West River Education District are termed advisable, so any one of those could opt out and the district would still form. But we do need 4 districts to actually move forward with this. When voting is in March on town meeting day, because we felt that was the best opportunity to get the biggest turnout. We couldn't have gotten this for the presidential election, and we couldn't get them to hold that next November, so town meeting day it was. The newly elected, you also, when you're voting for consolidation, will be voting for directors to serve on the new board. That board will not become operational until 2019, so they will have 2 years to basically plan, work to see what the new system is going to look like and how one board is actually going to put that in place for 5 schools. Go to the next one, I think. Okay, so one of the things we looked at in all of this was what the benefits to the students would be. Some of the ones that we have found we're
Time finding this room.
sorry. Within the new West River Education District, you sit up here if you want. There will be choice among elementary schools. There's language in the articles that says, children of a town have preference in their town, but then other children, where space permits, can move in. So a parent who works in Brattleboro and wants to drop their kid off in Newfane rather than Jamaica could do that. You could have somebody who lived in Newfane but worked at Grace Cottage and wanted to bring their kid here. There are reasons you would want to move kids around. So that could happen. That could happen now, but it's very difficult because of the district rules with schools. We think there can be more cross-school participation where you have one body planning things for a larger group. You can try and have groups do things together. We can share instructional materials, lessons, teachers, staff, programs. A successful program in one school can certainly be moved and implemented in another school. People can borrow successful programs and move it. We'll also have more flexibility in assigning staff since there's one employer, rather than looking when budgets, like now, budgets get a little tight, you start taking teachers from full-time to half-time, and how can you cut a 0.3 FTE or something? Well, maybe another school has capacity for that teacher, and with more, we would have much more flexibility in where we could put our staff because there would be a single employer and we can move them around. Next one, please. Okay, talking about efficiency and effectiveness with this, we're going to get rid of a lot of duplication. A lot of the operations to run individual schools are run now in each district. And really, when this is over, we would have 2 school districts. So a lot of the accounting, a lot of the state and federal reporting, audits, management of students, things of that nature will be consolidated. Again, we've got great flexibility of staff assignment. We also have some economy of scale in purchasing because we're going to be purchasing for a much larger student population. Whereas now, there's some, but not all purchasing is centralized. Right now, there's a lot of leadership is focused kind of individually around school to school to school. But if we unify the governance, it will allow leadership to increase the amount of time spent on educational improvement rather than moving from school to school to school. And then talking about finances, that's the next slide. These, I can actually go around and look at. So I can, go over here. All right, so this chart actually talks about what the per pupil spending would be if we would have been consolidated this year. The current school budgets, which you're probably familiar with, or we could get numbers for you, would look different had we consolidated and we were a consolidated district now. The first chart over on the left-hand side talks about what the per pupil spending would be under a consolidation now versus where it is. Okay? And then the second little chart on the bottom, boy, that's not focused very well, is it?
Even if you turn one of the lights
Oh,
out
it's
there.
my light. Like, should we focus it
Coming
too?
back.
Is that better?
That was better.
That's a little better, yeah. Okay, so that compares oh, that's better, do that.
That's good.
That talks about the change in the pre-CLA homestead residential tax rate with a unified district. Brookline actually is going to go down 3 cents. Jamaica is going to go down 11 cents. Newfane's going to go down 7 cents. Townsend's going to go down 15 cents, and Wyndham's going to go down 3 cents. That is pre-CLA. So I don't know what your common level of appraisal would do to it, and it's impossible. It's difficult to figure that out. But that's pre-CLA, and that CLA is moves around. So anyway, in addition to that, which sort of gives you a snapshot of what things could look like, the long-term financial incentives of Act 46 are that the newly formed district retains $221,000 in small schools grants that Townsend, Wyndham, and Jamaica currently receive. These grants are renamed to merger support grants and continue in perpetuity. Additionally, we receive a $150,000 grant from the state upon formation of the district to aid us in the implementation of the new system. Now, they do deduct from that the money that we've spent studying what we should do. So I think our study committee grant was $20,000, so we would lose $20,000. So it would be a net of $130,000. That's year one. In addition to that, we do have the tax incentive of 8 cents, 6 cents, 4 cents, and 2 cents off the homestead tax rate for the first 4 years of the formation. There may actually be other efficiencies which the new board would discover, and that's something they would be looking for in their first 2 years where they're not actually operating schools. But to try and list or figure them out for sure is sort of crystal ball gazing. So we've sort of stayed away and said these are the things we can concretely say will happen. You want to go to the next one? I told you it would be a short presentation. Any questions we can answer for you? Sure.
I just wanted to let everyone know that this slide presentation is on the blog site. So if you pick up the flyer and get that address, you can see these slides again. And it's a shareable link that you can share with others who may not be able to make any of the meetings. And if you could help us spread the word about a little bit and let people know that they can come to any meeting. They don't have to just come to the one in their town. There's going to be 4 more of these.
Yes.
And they can come to any of the meetings, even if it's not their town. So if you didn't take fast enough notes, don't worry, all this is on the blog site.
Well, the schedule of the meetings is actually on those little handouts by the door. They're small, but they've got all the contact information and the schedule of meetings on them for all 5 meetings. So take one and, you can always come to another meeting if you'd like.
And the articles are on the blog site.
The articles are on the blog site.
And you can ask a question on there too. If you middle of the night today think, oh, I should have asked this, just go there, click on the question, it'll come to me and I'll get it to them.
And we do answer. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, relative to Article 16 and the Articles of Agreement, you go into the Unified Board taking appropriate steps to include residents, okay? And then you list things. One of those things is making videos of board meetings available online. So I do have a question, because I'm really, really curious. You're outlining what you're going to do. So I would like to know why the committee then decided that BCTV was not going to record the meetings in January, and BCTV was not going to record the informational meetings. This seems contrary to what you're promising.
Well, I don't know what meeting in January BCTV didn't record.
4th and 16th, according to what's, I know the 4th. And then there were minutes just posted on the 16th. And I know that you had no
16th
intention of.
The 16th was a 20-minute emergency meeting to amend one article of the articles that had to do with a technicality of the at-large school directors. As the articles were written, you were voting for the directors from your town as well as the at-large directors on March 7th. However, statute says that you can only vote, that only necessary towns can vote for at-large directors on the first go-around, which would have meant that Newfane and Brookline would be the only towns allowed to vote on the 2 at-large directors. That was not the intent of the committee when we added the at-large directors. The intent was that it would allow towns with Brookline and Wyndham, who only have 1 representative because it's based on total population, to actually have additional representation.
For my question, sir.
We didn't tape that meeting because it was a 20-minute telephone meeting.
And what
Where-
about the decision not to record public information meetings?
Because these meetings are the same presentation of about 15 minutes or so every night, and then the questions from the public, which we have committed to send out by mail to everyone so that everyone will have an opportunity to see the questions. But we really didn't see the value in taping the information meetings, which are really just a conversation and probably between all the towns will be similar questions. We want people to come and actually talk to us. If you watch the questions on this meeting, you might decide you don't want to go to another meeting. Go ahead, Pat.
On the meeting about the change that we had to do, the emergency meeting, there were only 2 people actually at that meeting. And the
No,
rest of us
I'm not
were-
concerned with that one. I am concerned with the
And
4th.
The 4th, the purpose of that meeting was to determine the dates
For these meetings.
for
Oh,
these
that's right,
meetings.
that's right.
That's really
all we did.
all we did. And just said there's going to be a PowerPoint, and that was all really that we did at that meeting. It was just because nobody had all their stuff with them and the last meeting was before Christmas or something like that.
Yeah.
And so nobody was prepared to commit to certain nights. And we also knew we had budget meetings for Leland and Gray, and we hadn't determined those dates yet, I think, or something. It was just to do that in December wasn't going to be possible for everybody to say, yeah, I can be here at this, I can do this meeting. We had to check with what school board meetings were, what town clerks were doing. You know, there was just a lot of people we had to check with before we could set the dates for these meetings.
Well,
So
one
that's
of the
what that was.
things, you know, this is me. One of the things you're forgetting about, and I know people in this town who are going to be voting, who are going to be very interested, and they literally can't make it to a meeting like this. They're really, really pretty much housebound, and they're lucky to come down in March for town meeting. So by not recording this with interaction with the public, you're denying them the opportunity to even see what's going on. And I think they deserve the right. You've got BCTV, they can do this. And it's easy. And just to decide offhand, well, we want everybody to come. Well, everybody can't come.
And these meetings are very similar. The meeting is going to be the same, very similar in every town. Plus, these aren't really warned committee meetings. These are public information forum meetings. We don't have a quorum. We can't call it to order. It's not really a meeting.
Plus, all of our meetings that we've had up to this point, which are the really important, where all the information, all the questions we asked, how we created and amended and changed the articles, those are the real important meetings where there's really substance happening. And if anybody watches those, I mean, they may still, but that will help them have more questions. We also we are sending out a mailer, which went out today. It's going to every single postal box in all the towns. It will have a letter kind of paraphrasing some of this information. It will also talk about all the places where all of this information is, the ability to ask questions and get feedback. It's all possible to do if they can't come to meetings. It's totally possible, and this is not one of the main meetings. The meetings to watch are the ones that were really.
Well, we can make it easy. We can just arrange to have Brattleboro TV come and tape these meetings. I'm not sure, I'm not
Yeah.
convinced there's value, but rather than argue about it,
Yeah. But I mean, those are the ones to really watch.
Well, you know, it's,
That's where the substance.
when you look at the other group, they're taping all their public information meetings, or recording them. So it just kind of struck me as a little bit odd that you would decide that it really wasn't worth doing. And again,
It's not free.
I know it's not free. Who do you
Okay.
think paid for him?
Oh, I don't know, I can't
I
relate.
paid to have Rich here tonight.
Well,
Me.
we-
Because I felt it was
There's no
important
problem
enough to be
doing that.
recorded. So, you know,
okay,
lest
so we're
anybody.
gonna record them from now on, so we can move on then?
Yeah.
No problem with that.
Yes, sir.
And thank
So,
you.
can you explain to me some of I haven't really looked into your website much, but the modified, so if one town bops out, what's the net entail to happen in simple terms?
Well,
So if town opts out,
right. Well, if, as Joe said, if Brookline or Newfane vote to opt out,
that, but
then
one or the other one.
nothing happens. We stay as we are until the state decides that they might want to intervene and make
Of
something.
course they can, yeah.
Right. Whereas if, say, for example, Townshend puts in, is a no vote, the district there'll be a K-12 district that includes everybody, the 5 towns except for Townshend. And that'll be a K-12 district. And Townshend will still have an elementary school board. And I would believe they would wind up just having advisory members on the high school,
They would have board members that voted on decisions that affected,
only the high school.
well, they would vote on their own thing, and then they would no longer be a member of the high school, so they wouldn't.
Yeah, there would be.
No, they'd still be members of the high
You
school.
can't,
Yeah.
that vote can't opt out.
No, you're right, so they
They're
would,
advised.
they would have to be able to vote on matters pertaining to
They'd only be advisory.
7-12 decisions.
They'd only be advisory because it's a K-12 district.
Well, how can,
That's-
if they opt out.
We went through this with the red, that's how
How
I
they
know
opt
this.
out, then how can Leland and Gregg move forward opting out of the district, or basically, because to do that, you would all have to disband, and all the towns would have to agree to let the whole union disband. That vote can't be the same vote. That can't be.
It is because Leland and Gray is a separate entity, it's not a school district, it's a
Unified Union High School.
It's a union high school that was
formed
that
through-
all 5 towns signed on to. And since they signed on to that, they're committed to that contract of sending, or committed to the contract to send their students there. So
Right, but
what-
that'd be basically, technically, if that vote all passes, that's not the same vote to disabolish the union.
I remember
high
we
school.
talked about this at one of our meetings, and I can't recall what the answer was from John Everett, because we talked about what if one of the schools that's not necessary, and your kids still go to Leland and Gray, you have your own board, but I can't remember
How can you
what-
lose your voice to the
Well,
union then?
I can't remember what
Right.
part you can play. I think you still keep your,
You can only,
Say, can't
maybe you can
remember.
only
That's
vote
the
on the
question.
union.
You'll have to
Because
find
it's
out.
it's not a school district. Leland and Gray is not a school
it's-
district.
we're not really part of this.
It's a union school district, it's not a school
It's just the
district.
towns. and the elementary schools that are joining.
That's
So
one of
what
those
happens to the
questions-
Lumen and Gray Board?
It's not-
I agree with
to
you
verify.
that
It
if you
doesn't
decide
count.
to vote it down, that you should still have a say, at least at the high school
Yeah,
level.
and I think you
But I
do.
don't, to my knowledge, there is no legal wording that says that, because you don't have just a Leland and Gray board anymore, you have a K-12 board now. And then this is, because we did this in the red, we studied the red for 3 years in this.
I know, I was there.
Okay, and those questions came up, and it was.
And I never really got a clear answer on that.
Right, and what it was because it was actually at the time, it was Wyndham that was saying, well, we don't want to have any, then what do? Well, then you have your K-6 district and your advisory. You don't have a vote on the Leland and Gray board because there's no longer a Leland and Gray board. That is what came out of it
Yeah,
last.
but a no vote would mean that you couldn't abolish that. I mean, that was voted by law under the union, and not unless Act 46 somehow can trump the union rules, which I remember Emily saying was a whole separate different gamut. And that would have to agree to that, and I don't understand how this can all play around without necessarily covering.
We'll have to ask, because there
That
is
would
an
be
answer to it.
legal
and
counsel
remember
help
we-
on that one, it would be nice to
We
know.
talked about it, and the consultant told us how it works, and I do think that you still have a vote on Leland and Gray type things at the board meeting.
We'll
you
find out for
attend.
sure and get a definitive answer for you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't know how you can if you don't have an elected member.
John Everett.
We'll get the answer.
Okay.
Well, it's a question
But
that's
no,
already
that's
been
good.
asked.
No,
There
it-
obviously should be an answer somewhere.
We
Yeah,
talked
there-
about it.
There should be.
We talked about it.
You in the back and then you, Christine.
Just to clarify, because I think Dale and I were confused in the same way. West River Ed District is not a K-6, it's a K-12
Yes,
district we're setting up.
yes.
So that is a de facto replacement to the agreement we have for the Union District.
No,
Right.
it's not.
Well, if
Oh.
everything goes forward, if all 5 towns vote to do it, yes, it is a replacement of the union. Leland and Gray, Union High School, it'll still be Leland and Gray, but it'll be part of the, and because all the 5 towns that are involved in creating that Union High School vote to do something different, that does it. As far as, I can check that too, because perhaps legally the Union School still exists, but I don't know for sure. But I do know that, everybody becomes, if all 5 towns vote yes, Leland and Gray and the 5 towns, the 5 towns become this, and Leland and Gray remains their high school. But it does not have its own separate board, and it's no longer its own separate district.
Yeah, I think right now we're all separate districts,
Right.
whereas if we do Act 46, we will all be one district, including Leland and Gray, and we'll have one board. That's the change. It doesn't change any of the together of Leland and Gray and the towns. It just changes us from multiple districts that are legally together to one district that is still legally together, and we're governed by one board.
Right, but.
That's all fine and dandy in the big picture,
There's 2 pieces to consider in the reality of our recent history. And one is that much of what gets put before Townsend doesn't make it past a first vote. So what might that look like, which I think goes to Dale's question. And the second half of that is Jamaica tried unsuccessfully, even if it was a smaller faction, to get out of that district, to get out of the union. And would a no vote from Jamaica effectively allow them to exit the union if everybody else forms a district?
No, that's this whole separate thing, they'd have to try and do it again. You voting no, Townsend voting no would not take them out of the...
No, if Jamaica votes no, they
No,
don't
there
want
were
in.
none of the towns. If any of the towns vote no, you're still legally
You're still in
bound
Leland and
to
Gray
Leland
even
and
after
Gray.
Leland and Gray doesn't exist and is replaced by this district.
The school,
Right.
Leland and Gray school building will be there, but
Right.
there's no union school district. Well, there is, but it's a K-12
It's not-
district, and you're just tuitioning you're still under that contract obligation, is my understanding, of tuitioning your students to Leland and Gray. Because you're a sending town to Leland and Gray.
So,
Just like Newfane is,
But
just
we
like.
also,
Not
in that union, you also agreed to
Well, you pay-
have rights to speak at those and have control.
we
So that, I mean, you can't have one without the other.
I agree.
We don't
Right.
know the
We're gonna
answer.
find out.
Right.
Yes, just that's
Okay,
simple.
so
Yeah, there
this
is an
committee will
answer.
find out an answer.
There is an answer.
I can't guarantee
Remember
you'll
we
like the
talked.
answer,
Joe, how
but
will you
we'll
make
find
that
an
answer
answer.
public?
We're gonna post these questions on the blog site, and we've also committed to mail all the questions and answers before the last meeting out to all the postal patrons. Christina, you were next.
Is it going to be just a K through 12 district or pre-K through 12?
Pre-K.
Okay.
I just want to mention also that if this side of the equation falls through for these 5 towns, and the other 3 towns, Wardsboro, Marlboro, and Dover, if they should approve their articles of agreement, they can't do it unless this side does it. So there aren't just 5 towns writing on this, there are actually 8 towns writing on this, because they can't exist even if they approve it, if this side doesn't
Because
approve
you
it.
need the high school.
Is that work conversely? If they don't approve?
No.
No, we-
It's
No,
just
we
us.
can-
'Cause
we
we
can
have a
go
high
forward.
school.
You have to be a pre-K-12 district.
And they're
One of the sides of
they're
the
all
side.
choice high schools.
Yeah, one of the districts has to be pre-K-12.
Yeah, so if this side fails and the other side approves, then they just automatically fail also.
Are they aware of that?
They are.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
they are now.
So would the pre-K look like, so they could come to Townsend, or, I know Townsend and Jamaica and Wyndham occasionally has a pre-K. I know Newfane contracts out. So would pre-K kids be able to, I mean, how's that gonna work? Is there gonna be like a cap to how many kids can go to each of these programs? I mean, because some kids now are getting 10 hours and some kids are getting full
Yeah.
time, depending on the town.
Back to what Joe was saying earlier, you know, the school, the town that has the school will get first choice. If there's additional spaces, my understanding is those could come in from out of town. But if it gets full, it gets full.
And I would assume a new board
And
would
they-
also have some conversations and discussion to make those
100%.
determinations.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that has to be worked.
Because a lot of those fine details aren't ironed out until the new board's
And that's,
formed.
right, that's the
Right,
purpose.
that's
of the
why the
grant.
new board gets elected in 2017 and doesn't take control until 2019, so that those things can
Those key
be.
positions are the ones that are the masterminds of it all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if you're interested,
That's right. If you're interested in running for that new board, by the way, anybody from Townsend, you guys have what, 2?
we have, yes, you guys have 3, right?
We have 3.
So we have
Yeah,
2.
two.
We have 2 positions.
Okay.
2 on the first
So
year.
if you go to your town clerk and get a petition, get 30 signatures on it, turn it back in before the 30th, you'll be on the ballot.
I actually have petitions.
If I may, that was one of my questions, okay? The 35-page document here confuses that. So one of my questions was, where do you get the petition and where do you turn it in? Because the document implies you're turning into the school district clerk. It goes school district or town. And those are 2 completely different clerks.
Correct.
So that really does need to be clarified. You go to the town clerk.
Well, I know my school district clerk would be awful upset if people started giving him petitions because he wouldn't know what to do with them. But
Well, it's
they
just
go,
the
so,
way this is written.
so for your information, make sure you bring this up at, I guess, all the informational meetings. Your town clerk, and if your town clerk should have them. If I recall correctly, we made sure that each town clerk knew the proper, it's actually, I can tell you, I have one right here. I'm running.
We actually, if you want one tonight, we actually have them on the premises.
Oh, you do?
So you can
Okay.
actually get a copy of it, but you don't return it to the school, you return it to the town clerk.
It's actually a union, and this is funny, it's a union school district nomination for officer. And if you look it up on the Department of Elections website, it actually says a union high school. It says it's the union high school one, because that's the only union one that the state has, and that's the one they are going by. So, that much I do. That's a solid.
Go ahead.
I would like to have clarification on the term Direct delivery of student educational programs.
On.
Well, the term is one of those that's used in whether or not a decision is made to close a school. So the big question becomes, if you put the entire Wyndham Central Supervisory Union offices in here, using this building as an example, could be any buildings, and you had 2 or 3 little classrooms, would the building still be considered used as direct educational delivery?
In other words, if the pre-K was here, and
And the rest
That
of
would
them all
probably be the perfect-
offices?
Go ahead.
as long, go ahead, you want to, I know because I used to be a landlord to a school, so go ahead.
Well, what our discussion was, how this came about was, we discussed that, because Wyndham had a serious issue about being vulnerable because they're so small, and it was decided that, if it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, eventually it will just naturally be a decision that they will make that we've only got 6 kids here. So we didn't want to, so that's where that came from, was as long as there are still parents who want their kids to go there and the school's open.
Yeah, but what I'm looking at is the
I don't-
blending of a little bit of direct education and the rest turning out to be administrative.
Well, we can't decide,
We had this problem with Newfane and Brookline when we formed the joint board. And it was ironic because what had happened, there was this thing where we weren't going to close Brookline School. But a majority of the Brookline people said, close the school. We have, I think it was at the time it was like 13, maybe 20 kids there. I can't remember the exact amount. But they were like, close the school and just put them all in one building. It just makes sense, And so that's how we wound up doing it. In the articles here, no school can close for 5 years, guaranteed for 5 years, and only on a vote, a positive vote.
See, that's a piece, I've been through this, and there is nothing in this at all that gives that 5-year limitation.
No.
It leads you to believe this in perpetuity,
Right.
that no school will ever be closed, ever.
no.
Yeah.
Well, then it needs to be
That's right.
seriously clarified,
That's right.
because it is not on the papers.
Rick, may I just, so it was a discussion, and it was decided based on the fear of, really came from Wyndham, doesn't want anybody but the townspeople to close the school. The discussion was most towns feel very strongly about closing their school buildings. We took out that 5-year thing, which was what was proposed. And we said the only time the board can close a school in these 5 towns was if there were no more children attending that school.
No more kids.
That was what that wording, direct delivery of education services, was all about, is the board will only have the power to close a school in one of the 5 towns if by natural transition there is no children attending that school any longer. Otherwise, it is always in the town's voters' hands.
So we're not talking about a 5-year limitation, we're
We took
talking
that
about
out.
this is the way it
We
is
took that out.
We took that
Yeah.
out.
all the
Yeah.
time.
It
Yeah,
was
but if the
proposed-
board decides to move all the kids out of the building,
We
then that creates it.
don't, we don't do
The
that.
board won't have that,
The parents
cannot do
decide
that.
that. They decide, because they have choice. If somebody wants their child to have, more diversity than 5 kids or 6 kids, then, and it just will. Eventually, if that's the direction it's going to go, it will go in that direction, and
Yeah.
there's nothing we can do to stop
Yeah,
it.
I see
If
that.
it's not going to happen, it will be, it won't. It just happens or it doesn't, and then that reverts to the town, the building, right, reverts to the town. It's not the district, sold to the town for
Only
a
if the town
dollar.
wants to buy it.
Only if
Otherwise,
the
the school
town,
district has to
it
maintain
still
it.
has to maintain it and take care of it, and
That brings up a question I was gonna actually bring up later. At what point, for say, this is just a scenario, say 10 years down the road, 15 years, but in 10 years, the board starts to decide, yeah, the building's starting to fall apart a little bit. We ain't gonna put any money into it. In 15 years, we're gonna do something different. And then now the town's taxpayers at this point have a worthless building that's below grade. Is there language in there that makes it have to be
There's probably no
equivalent
language in
to
there,
today's?
This is what I found with, we allotted, I think it was $18,000 a year to maintain the Brookline building when we weren't using it. So it just becomes a budget item for, we had a custodian come in, you know, and do some basic, you know, as you know, any building usually vacant, there's stuff that has to be done.
Right.
You know, water has to get turned off in the winter, heat gets turned down, but you still have to maintain heat, you still have to have electricity. Since it's still considered a public building, you do have to have a telephone line in, even though there's nobody there to use it. So all these costs are consumed by the district, even if the building is unoccupied, unless the school district sells it back to the town for $1. And then it's up to the town to say, yes, we want that building, we're gonna turn it into a community center, yeah, or whatever they
Well,
decide.
my fear was,
And
is that it could get run down, and then we've already put tax dollars into this building, and it's not in the same condition value-wise as it was in the day that the whole district took ownership of it, in that
The town may
sense.
choose not to take it over. There is an opportunity there for the town not to accept the
Right,
building.
they don't have to.
And it's written in here, it says, in the event the town elects not to acquire ownership of such real property, the unified district shall pursuant with Vermont statutes sell the property upon terms and conditions as established by the board.
Yeah,
Which
but
would be
the
board.
taxpayers may not wanna have it sold,
No.
but they might want it, but then they're getting a building that's not worth their value, back to their share.
I have to say, you served on a board.
I know I have.
I've served on a board.
I served on a board on a building that was pretty bad shape.
Have you served on a board and sat there and allowed a building to go to pot? What good does it do your district if you allow your buildings to disintegrate and crumble around you? It's not, I mean, it just makes no sense as my,
You have to make tough decisions, and sometimes tough decisions make tough things, and there is things.
you
that-
find a way.
There is
You
hidden beasts in a
always-
lot of these buildings. I know.
Oh, I'm sure there are, you know, they're old buildings. But, and the one thing, I went to high school in a district that was like this. It was Governor Wentworth Regional High School District. And we had one high school and we had a bunch of towns and elementary schools. They had a 20-year plan. And in that, because it was all one board, and in that plan, they could decide, okay, 10 years from now, we're gonna replace Effingham School. And Effingham School did get replaced. It might have been 10 years ago now, but that happened. And 5 years from now, we're gonna do this to this school, this school. It doesn't leave it all to separate boards, and the towns are getting hit with, well, Jamaica School needs this, but Leland and Gray also needs this, and neither one of them know that they each need it. And so you know, it's hard for you to keep up with how are these different buildings being taken care of if you have one board. You have one board overseeing all of these buildings, and they make a plan as to how they're gonna do this and take care of these buildings in an affordable way. And they may decide at some point that, you know, these buildings, a couple of these buildings they're just like, we're trying to keep them together with thumbtacks.
So the bottom line is, we don't have an answer if it could go in disarray or not. It's all up to the new board. When it comes time to elect board members, choose wisely.
Yeah, yeah.
My best answer.
Or choose the only
Same as you
people
choose
running,
now.
which happens to be the case sometimes.
Well, we're hoping that
Wise
that
men
will be
sometimes are
different
very
now
wise
too.
men for a reason.
Hoping that will be different, that more people will be involved.
Yeah, a real quick question on the balloting situation. Okay, so I do understand that each town is going to have X number of representatives, and then those representatives will be elected from that town. and then you're gonna have 2 at-large who will be elected from all the towns together. Okay, so just to look at the future, is this gonna mean that Townsend, for example, gets 2 ballots, one with just the people, say we have 5 people running for 2 seats, or 1 seat, quite frankly, because of the way it's staggered. But say we have 5 people running for that seat, there has to be a way to identify that as the Townsend rep,
There is.
as opposed to, so is it a plan on a separate, or 2 separate ballots, one for at-large and one for the specific district or town reps?
Yeah, there's different ballots.
You have to actually, when you want to apply for the district seat, you actually you can get signatures from the other towns as well, I believe.
Oh, yeah, no,
So,
that's
and
clear.
that was
Yeah.
one of the big confusions of them doing the at-large originally, besides the, if you're not in the district yet, you can't have an at-large vote. But, there'll be 2 ballots,
Okay.
one for, Townsend representatives, and then there'll be another one that there could be 5 people running for the 2
Yeah.
positions, 8 people, whatever.
From all the
And
different towns.
you can pick up your petition, well, you should pick up your petition from your, say, if you wanted to run for the at-large next year in Townsend. You pick up a petition. You can have it signed in any one of the 5 towns. But you have to have 60 signatures
Right.
versus the 30 that they're asking for this consolidated board. Only because you're going to be, and you don't have to, you can get all 60 from Townsend. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, as long as you have 60 people with it who are registered voters in the entire district, yeah.
Yes.
So my concern was how many ballots, you know, how you were going to separate it so that we knew that we were voting for at-large and we knew we were voting for Townsend. I mean, that way it would be clear, it would be, you know, delineated. There are going to be a lot of people voting on these races, but only Townsend residents are going to be on.
Right, and that would also be a mess for the town clerks if they were all on one.
Well, that's what I kind of figured, yeah.
You know, I mean, think about it, because, you know,
And it will probably say it's an
It would
at-large.
say
yeah,
it's
it will say at large for all
It would
5
say
towns.
check the box for one of them.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted, oh, I'm
Excuse
sorry.
me.
Did
I was just wondering, how is this going to benefit the students in the future, this consolidation? Exactly how is that going to work? I understand you're going to be moving teachers around, are you going to be moving students around? Just how is that going to work?
Well, we could not make any claims to any benefits for students because it's all up to whatever the new board decides to do.
But that's what it's all about, is the students, right?
You're correct. It is all about the students. And well, school choice was one of the things they came up, sharing curriculum amongst the schools.
Pre-K, having some towns. They
How would you
use-
share that?
How would you share?
How would you share what?
Pre-K?
The curriculum?
If a teacher develops a course, say you got a teacher at Townsend that teaches a course, you know, that other students, that is very successful here. Kids are learning, they're doing very well. That teacher can go teach teach with another teacher at another school, show them how it works. They can, you know, it's once they've developed the course, they can take it anywhere. And either another teacher can use the same course materials and stuff, or you can move teachers around. I mean, we do it now to a certain extent with the WCSU. We have physical education teachers are shared, music teachers are shared, you know, some special ed things are shared, and the teachers work in one building 2 days a week, and in another building 2 days a week, and in another building 1 day a week. You know, we could, if there's a single employer, we can do that with more teachers. We can add language teachers to that, math teachers to that. We can have teachers who normally were teaching in the high school setting or the middle school setting. If they have extra time in their day, they can go down and teach in the elementary school setting.
I can give them a perfect example of that.
Sure.
Back in Newfane a few years back, this teacher happened to retire just when we were getting ready to do it, was and it was David Parker, who was a fantastic guy. He used to do this thing with simple machines. You know, making a lever or a hoist, whatever. The kids would make their own projects. They would build bridges to see how many bricks the bridge could hold out of like popsicle sticks, straws, and those kind of materials, just so they could figure out how to do this certain task. And the kids would, and parents would come in, they go, this is really great, you should share this with the other schools. You know, you could get something like that and put it even, you don't even have to have the teacher leave the building. You can have them instruct over the internet with another teacher in the other classroom saying, this is what we did, you know, for this project, and this is, you know, and we're flipping over to Townshend to see what ideas they came up with. And then the students can interact that way also, without even the teacher even leaving the building. But the teacher could, you know what I mean, they could just like swap teachers for a day or something like that, if they're teaching one, you know, a master at teaching a certain thing, and another one's at another subject that they're really, really good at, hands-on stuff, and then just switch them from school to school on those different things. That's one way to do it. It's probably the simplest way to explain it. But as far as moving a teacher from building to building, I find that hard.
Do you think presently that schools, individual schools, right now communicate with each other?
This question was actually brought up. Yes, the individual schools do.
I mean, if they do that already, why do we have to consolidate if they do it already?
Well, some people are under the impression that the teachers will communicate better if they're all in one district.
Well, that's quite priceless. Townsfolk will have to pay, I mean, giving up their own school for the reason you just gave me.
One issue
Right.
that
You're
I've
not gonna-
been concerned with since we've been in the supervisory union is a problem of curriculum alignment. And the teachers at the junior high here have talked about it since I've been here, and that is that when the kids come to the 7th grade from the different schools, they are at different places. And that makes it really hard for the teachers, it makes it hard for the kids, and the subject that has suffered the most, they tell us, is math. And even though there is communication, it doesn't get solved. It just kind of goes on and on and on, and one reason, I think, is because the accountability to the supervisory union can be weak. And the districts still kind of do what they believe they want to do, and that's a natural thing to do. But if you have a unit district, then those curriculum guidelines become more important. That's one thing. So curriculum alignment to me is really, really important. And the other thing is, I believe too that the schools communicate. They tell us they communicate. They do, I believe them. But yet, there isn't very much real sharing in each other's activities and what the other schools do. When it comes down to it, they talk with each other, but there's not the real sharing in the core things that really matter.
I mean, I think when it comes down to it, they meet as teachers in the same grade level 3 times a year. It's not a lot of days to really commit to sharing and following through on that. I mean, they do try, but there's not, I mean, this may give us more opportunities in that regard. But I don't think that's the basis for this whole thing. It's just one piece of it.
And we also implemented the Common Core in all the different schools now, which is aligning the curriculum, even though we are separate districts now, and we're still working on that to solve that problem, even if this doesn't go through.
Do you think you'll have trouble getting teachers to float, like you're describing, from one school to the next to teach a subject? I can't imagine a teacher enjoying that too much that they...
I personally couldn't either, But I would imagine that if your boss says, well, you're working here today and working there tomorrow, you're working there.
A lot of this is-
You know, it's,
I
Oh,
think
it is a
what-
job, yeah.
right.
I think what we're seeing though, especially at the high school, is teachers aren't being given full-time work anymore. And even the special teachers are being, you know, Wyndham might decide they're not gonna have that half a day of gym anymore because they can't afford it. It's unfortunate, but a lot of these teachers are kind of like, what do I do? Do I go elsewhere to get a full-time job? How do I fill in that .2 or .3? And this would allow to keep some great teachers in our district and fill their time around 5 schools.
Like Leland and Gray's music is 1.85. So
Yeah.
there's somebody who's a professional certified teacher who's working 0.85.
He's actually full-time. He's through the district and they have it set at 15. But we have a question in the back.
Setting aside the fact that most full-time teachers also have a second job, speaking from experience. And while I do agree that the conversation should be student-centered, I've got a question. The equalized number that we're paying in primary school across, the state says a secondary student is just under 15, and I really can't recall what the primary student cost number is. If anybody has that off the top of their head, that would be useful. But are we expecting to see a per student equalized reduction across the board in a unified West River Education District?
That's hard to say, that wasn't part of our
necessarily.
discussion. Yeah, that wasn't a basis for what's happening. And we're not, there's no guarantee of cuts because a board has to make those decisions.
Right, and so I guess the reason I inquire about that is on the outside chance that this goes to vote and Townsend does not go along with it. And the outside chance that not doing that, they then decide to become a sending town in a few years down the road for either 712 or, heaven forbid, K6. We're looking at secondary sending out the door 15, whatever, 14,744, whatever the state says the per student choice amount is. Is that amount, for our edification, going to be more or less than what we can expect to see in the near future with a consolidated West River Education District?
There's no way to
That
answer
number
that.
changes
You're
every
talking
year.
about it.
That number changes every year anyway.
A choice?
Well, here's the thing, we're sending one way or another, right? Except we don't have choice, as for secondary school as Townsend, right? So that number is going to that school. Should we decide to do it with our elementary school, the state sets a primary school number, if I understand that correctly, and we would be sending potentially whatever that dollar figure is, though it would be in district from Townsend, from supporting this facility to our friends in Newbrook or over into Jamaica. How does that in any way affect?
You have your
Oh,
own.
so you're talking about if all 5 districts get together
Yeah.
and Townsend decides out, or is Townsend in? And one,
In either scenario.
Okay, if
I mean,
Townsend-
compare the two as close as I can, apples to apples, in terms of what kind of money is following which students where and under which circumstances. which
okay,
is only half the concern.
if all 5 towns are in and you decide you're a Townsend resident, you want to send your child to Newfane, there's no transfer.
change.
There's no change.
It's one district.
It's one
It's
district.
all one district now.
It's
So
all
there,
one
so there'll be
budget.
no change.
There's one
And
budget.
so he wants to compare our per pupil cost of a unified district
Mhm.
to if Townsend said,
Opt
voted
out.
no, and 5 years down the road, we decide not to have this school, and we're just gonna pay to send them somewhere.
Become a tuition town?
Becoming
If
a
we
tuition
become a
town.
tuition
That's
town,
what he
and
wants
I
to
want to keep
compare.
my kids sending them to Newbrook, and we're not in that system, right?
The state
That would be
changes
up to
those numbers
your-
every year.
Well, by a percentage, I mean, as far, you know,
Right, by a certain amount.
1.3%, 1.7% year over year. But, I mean, in terms of those numbers, are we expecting a 14% drop, a 15% increase.
There's no way to predict it.
No way to
There is no
predict.
way of predicting that either
Marlboro
way.
does that right now. They're
Right.
sending,
Yeah.
and their advice to all other districts is never, ever, ever, ever do that.
It gets
Because the
pretty costly.
costs get out of control.
Because you
You have
can't
no
mandate where
control.
people are gonna send
No,
their kids.
and you have no idea what your budget's gonna be for the next
All,
year.
Right.
the only thing you decide in your budget if you become a sending town is your transportation and your tuition. And if you don't tuition what the different schools want, then the parents have to cover the difference. And that's your only decisions you can make.
Right, and most of the independent schools set the amount of their tuition to what the state says the equalized secondary education.
So far.
And then,
Right.
then you could run into this gamut, is you do that realm, and you could sit there and say, we have 62 students, so we're gonna budget it for 62 students. And then all of a sudden, you got 70 students, and you got a $250,000 deficit.
Yep.
The next year that you gotta bring it back up, so your tax rate goes whoop, whoop,
And that's what's happening in Marlboro.
all the time.
But isn't this what Governor Scott just put out this week, that he's planning on doing, this thing where we can't lose students at a greater rate than 3.5% is going away? You lose 40 students from a district, you don't feel that the same way year over year, that's going away.
That's going
That we now are,
The
again,
whole time.
closer to the
The
free
phantoms.
market system.
He wants to eliminate
that
the
the private
phantoms.
schools are dealing with.
But I
and
thought
other
Act
school
46
districts have to do
had-
it that have
I'd like
choice.
to see how
As
they
a
do
plan.
Yes, but I could tell you on the other end of it, it's,
Yeah,
You can,
if you
you
consolidate.
still have the whole
You
harmless,
have
but if
hold
you don't,
harmless.
the phantom
For how
students are
long?
being phased out.
don't
They're
think-
not saying how long.
Yeah.
There were no limits on it.
Yeah,
But it's
I
part of the act
They're phasing that.
that you
They're phasing
have.
it out, they're phasing it out now, but if you
Yeah.
consolidate, the phase out goes away for you. They're
Right.
just not saying how long it goes away.
Because everybody got hit with that phase out
You know?
this year, but next year, if we consolidate.
Hold on, Al
we
has the
won't.
answer.
Well, no, I was gonna say, he also is proposing that we don't actually vote for a
Right,
budget
right.
on March 7th. We vote for it on May
that
22nd, which
has-
will give us so much more time to vote on a flat budget across the state.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Yes.
you can't when you already got already built-in contracts with increases and contracts, I can't believe the governor can break contracts, but
Yeah.
Well, just find other places to cut that are not.
that's right, you gotta cut from somewhere else.
So back to Act 46.
Yeah, I wanted
Let's
to
talk about
clarify that, because I know some of this, that they're talking about taking the small schools grants away, but my understanding from what you've been saying and from what's in the literature is that if we were to form this district, then we're not under the threat of losing that additional money that's thrown into the small schools.
Correct, they are converted to merger support grants.
And there again, that's certainly not in perpetuity, that's going to be phased out.
Well, that
Well,
right now is in perpetuity.
How that's gonna work, Newfane and Brookline do not get a small schools grant. Ever since our merger, we didn't even get we'll give it to you for 2 more years, it went away. Townsend, Jamaica, and Wyndham still have small schools grant. That money will get taken and thrown into the new district budget, which will be all 5 towns.
But it will still be coming down from the state.
Right,
Yes.
and the bottom line, if you're into numbers, the bottom line is that, I'm not even gonna talk about what it does to Newfane, because I'm gonna be nice tonight. Bottom line is, say our cost per pupil is an even $15,000 K through 12 in every district. And Townsend has 100 kids going to K through 12, and Newfane has 100 kids going to K through 12. We're both gonna have a different tax rate for education. Why? Because of the CLA in each town, and it'll never be equal until they figure out statewide, and they never will, so. That's why we're not equal when we form this, we're equitable, is that what they say? Equity. We have
Well, the
equity, we're not equity.
CLA I'm very familiar with, believe me. I was just concerned, I mean, because the small schools grant is what you would call gift money from the state. And the state's saying, we're going to take this gift money away from you if you don't do this. But if you do this, we're going to let you still have your gift money.
But we're gonna change
But
the
you
name.
We're going to change the name.
Right.
Right, okay.
So speaking on that note, and if we vote on March, whatever, and all this and that, what happens with the legislation if they decide to change and do negativity parts that affect us negative under any amendments to Act 46, this legislation? That I know
Vote
there's
them out.
several of them coming through.
Vote them out.
I can't speculate on pending legislation. I don't think anyone can.
No, we can't, but is there, I mean, sometimes is it worth waiting?
Contact your representatives.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
like
gamble.
representatives. I was
Yeah.
at the Montpelier most of today, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of changes to Act 46.
It's a gamble.
I just knew there was Grambles, but I mean, yeah, I just didn't know if there was.
I don't think there's any big changes coming. They're not looking to change much. They're looking to see what happens. They're wanting merger votes to go forward and people to do this.
I know there was some twerking because of some of the negative votes. I know they wanted to do a little tweak it.
They were asking about, what tweaks would help and what could change and how would it be better and there are some things with specifically the other side of our side-by-side that could help Marlboro with their vote because they're actually looking to if they consolidate, would be losing their middle school program. And there are some issues around choice and decisions towns with choice have to make. But there's not a lot of big tweaks there that they're looking
Well,
for.
and there's
Nothing
also
that's going to
things
change
that
our
are
situation.
Positives
much.
that can come from it, and then we would be locked out of it, that's all. Just a question.
I think that the letter that you're gonna get in the mail tomorrow, or it's going out tomorrow?
It's went out today.
So people will get it tomorrow, or the next day. I think that,
Not guaranteed because
It is
the way it's
posted.
posted.
yeah, the way that letter is written, I think will be really helpful to a lot of people. And it will both answer questions and it will prompt people to ask more questions. So I think that letter is gonna be very helpful. It's posted on the front page of the blog right now, if you wanna read it ahead of time.
And you can address, the best place to do it for questions is go to that blog and send the emails with questions and it goes right to us.
And it's the same letter that Rick, I forwarded Rick this letter, and he forwarded it to all his followers, so it's that same letter that you're referring
It's
to.
out there.
Yeah.
Mhm. Just another technical question. Sure. Do we have any idea when the annual meeting date would be for this thing?
The board would figure that out.
I would get, or is it like the budget vote and all that? Is that what you mean by for the annual meeting?
Well,
I think it would be
Yeah,
similar to
because-
what Leland and Gray
I-
did,
I
there's
thi-
no set
I
time.
It's an
think-
Well, you see,
Australian ballot.
Leland Gray is definitely set, and Leland Gray is a lousy time of the year. That's why I was wondering if they were going to start this new district with an annual meeting a month or two before the beginning of the fiscal year, which would put it in May or June, which is a whole lot better time for people to
Those
be
rules
out
would
and
be
about.
But
decided.
you have to have your stuff done for town meeting day.
I think that's all up for,
Well,
but I read the paper today, who knows?
In a new order, so yeah.
Well,
I think we could.
I don't know if you, because any of our Newbrook business doesn't get done at town meeting
Yes,
in
yeah.
Newfane or,
Right.
other than voting for representatives for each school district is done at town meeting.
When is your,
Our budget
meeting.
vote, actually, our informational meeting for the budget is on the 8th of February, which happens to be the same day that Leland and Gray's budget is.
yeah,
And ours is actually the 15th this year is our budget vote. And how we wound up getting the same day as Leland and Gray for our, it was just the way it wound up when we did it. So, actually, we originally held our budget votes on a Saturday, which gave us op time in the middle of the week that we could pick any other day but the Wednesday before. But now that we had people from the town said, No, we don't want to do it on the weekend, we want it on a weeknight. And then they voted on Wednesday's the best night to do it, and that's how we got there. So, but ours is usually the second Tuesday, or the second Wednesday of the month, and it just happened to conflict with. You know, it would have normally been it would have been the 8th, and then it would have fell on the same day as Leland and Graves.
Right.
But because just where Wednesday happened to fall, so we just moved it a week out. That's how we got stuck there this year.
So not into the warmer months, which is where you were going with this, right? A warmer time of year to have a meeting where people get out more, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my concerns with Leland and Gray, for example, is the fact that it really is a difficult time of the year. So you're creating a new district, and it would be nice for that new district to actually have its annual meeting at a better time of the year, you know.
So an
people
act-
could get
That
out.
actually might
Yeah,
be
you
possible.
know.
So when Act 46 passes,
I think
and
that's-
a new board
that's-
has been created, we should attend that first meeting of that new board and put it in their brain to think about for the next 2
Well,
years.
I don't even know if they can do it. See, that's why Leland and Grays was set by state statute. It wasn't?
No.
They
No.
decided to
No,
do it in
that's
February?
This is it. This is
We're
the
gonna try and
catch.
change it.
Leland and Graves was set up in February because they needed enough time in case the budget failed to go back to the drawing board before town meeting.
Okay.
Whereas if all 5 districts are one district, the only thing that you have to do at town meeting is vote on members and give an update on what's going on at the school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that budget
So
probably
it
could go,
It could move forward.
yeah.
I couldn't say going to, May or June because you'd only have a month. I mean, it could, but I'd probably say maybe May.
Could be April.
Yeah,
Could be
April.
February.
April, May.
Nice.
Could be April.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
That's actually a very strong possibility
20
that could
below
happen.
0.
Oh, man.
That's fun.
It's a bad time of the year to have meetings.
Yeah,
It is.
It is. It's really bad. And before Christmas is really bad.
Mhm.
It has to be done by July 1st.
Any other questions,
Anything else?
comments, who's, hisses, anything?
I'd like to thank you guys for your hard work on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you have more questions, like we said, like Anita said, if you think of something, those flyers have an email address. It has a blog spot where you can ask questions, or you can reach out to any committee member, and I was gonna say, I think we're all listed on there, but we're not. We're listed on the
Other flyers.
email, we're listed on the WCSU site. We're all
And the
fairly
letter you're
findable.
gonna get in the mail.
So thank you again
So,
for
and like
coming.
they said, if you do have a question, you think of it at 3 o'clock this morning, the internet's open all night long, you can just type it in and send it.
And if any Townshend resident wants a petition to run, I have
Oh,
them
yeah.
downstairs. It's gotta be done by Monday.